Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Permafrost. Today, we're starting Botania. Before we get into Botania proper, let's take a look at what we've been doing in between episodes. This right here is the result of that. It's the second floor of our keep, and as you can see, it's starting to look a lot nicer. I've also added actual stairs to go down here into our main room, and I think this one has gotten a big facelift. Yeah, there's still a lot of torches everywhere, but the important parts are here. We have these Druidcraft crates as our storage system. They can hold a ton of stuff, so very easy. And as you can see, I started moving all of our belongings over here, and at this point, we just live here. As you can see, I've transferred over most of the create setups. Right now, it's just the basic blasting, smoking, and washing setups, as well as standard vanilla enchantment over there, and a little bit of a nether portal over there, you can see. But honestly, none of this is too important compared to what we're going to be doing today. And what we're going to be doing today is more or less rushing through Botania. We have a chest up here with most of what we're going to need, and we're just going to see how far we can get. Our ultimate goal with Botania is simple. We want to be able to make the Terra Steel armor set over here, but that's going to be a ways off, because as you might be able to see, these are expensive. So, take it one step at a time. And those steps start with the Petal Apothecary. This is just a mushroom and some cobblestone, so extremely cheap. But this is how all of our Botania stuff is going to begin. Using a Petal Apothecary is pretty straightforward. First, we just set it down and add a bucket of water to it. Then, you want to add the ingredients for your craft, which in our case is just 4 white mushrooms, to it. As you can see, they are inside the actual apothecary. And then, throw in some regular seeds to complete the craft and get a pure daisy. This is how we make some of the most basic items in all of Botania, which are living rock and living wood. I'll show you how to do that. In order to make living wood and living rock, you're going to want to put your pure daisy on a grass block and put the material that you want to transmute around it. In this case, since I want living rock, I'm going to put 8 stone around the pure daisy, and if you give it about a minute, it will be converted. As you can see, the pure daisy has done its job and turned that boring old stone into some nice living rock. I'm going to repeat this process for half a stack of both living rock and living wood, and I'll be back in a second. Now that we have some living wood and living rock, we can explain why we actually need those. Botania is a mod that works entirely, or almost entirely, off of a resource called mana. And to store and transfer that mana, you're going to need something known as a mana pool, made with living rock, and a mana spreader, which requires living wood along with a mushroom and some gold. Another set of items that Botania likes to make extensive use of are these mystical petals, or their alternative mushroom counterparts. But because mushrooms can't be grown, we want to switch to using Botania flowers as soon as possible. And to do that, we're going to combine bone meal with 4 of any dye and create this floral fertilizer. Once this gets used on a patch of grass, it'll grow a random assortment of Botania flowers. By taking more bone meal and using it on them, we can grow these flowers, maybe, into a 2-block tall version. Taking some shears, we can now harvest this and turn it into 4 mystical light blue petals, which is what we need. Even better is the fact that we can take one of these petals and plant it as a seed, which we can then bone meal into a 2 tall flower again. This means that once you use the floral fertilizer and get 1 of each flower, you now effectively have an infinite amount of that petal, so long as you have the bone meal for it. And by taking these petals that we've just grown and using them along with a pestle and mortar, it can actually create dyes straight from the flower, which can immediately be reused to make more floral fertilizer. This means that with a little bit of bone meal, which admittedly we don't have a lot of, we can now make an infinite amount of these Botania flowers, and hopefully harvest all the ones that we'll need to make our first functional flower. It's a new day here, and I've spent a little bit of time completing these miscellaneous quests to collect all of one of each flower and to make a pouch to hold them all. But the real meat of Botania starts now, when we want to generate mana. And we're going to follow the quest book here and make an endoflame as our first generating flower, because quite frankly, it's the easiest and by far the best. This is going to consume furnace fuels, anything that can burn in a furnace, and turn it into mana. The first thing we're going to do is turn some living wood into living wood twigs and combine them with some mushrooms to make a wand of the forest. That's a quest, but this allows us to basically bind flowers and mana spreaders together. The next step is to make the endoflame themselves. This is a pretty easy recipe because all it requires is just petals. And ta-da, we now get an endoflame. I'm going to make 2 of these just for fun because we will want many of these eventually, but I think 2 is a good number to start with. And I'm going to set them up right here for now. It should be somewhat temporary. This won't be our final mana generation system, but for now, I think that this will be a good spot just to tuck them away and start, well, producing some mana, honestly. I'm going to put this here. This is the mana spreader, and I'm going to make sure that it's pointing towards a mana pool, but also next to the flower. And then taking my Wand of the Forest and making sure that it is in bind mode, I'm going to right-click this to a mana spreader. And now, as you can see, there's a little check mark next to the mana spreader icon, which means that the mana spreader sees, or that the flower is connected to this mana spreader. I'm going to now repeat the same thing and shift right-click this mana spreader into the mana pool. You can see it changes a little bit. And any mana that this flower makes is now going to go into the mana spreader, which will push it into the mana pool. As for actually producing mana, the way these work is really, really simple. Like I said earlier, they just burn furnace fuels and turn it into mana. I'm going to use this block of fiery glass as our fuel because it is able to burn a lot of items. This is more than lava can usually do. So if I toss one down, you can see that this should now pick it up, has a nice little sound effect, and we're going to start getting mana in our mana pool, just like that. The one downside of this is that it's going to take about 5 whole minutes for that block to be consumed, during which this flower will not be making any more mana. It's just going to burn that block for 5 minutes. So I'll see you guys in a bit. Now, I said these would take about 5 minutes to consume one of those blocks, but that was a lie. They take about 10 minutes. So I added in a few more endoflames just to get them to hurry up a little bit, but we now have a pretty convincing amount of mana. You can see we're at a little bit below a quarter of the mana pool full, maybe 1/5, so that should be more than enough to get started and actually begin making several of the key Botania items. We're going to start by making a runic altar. This will allow us to craft all of the Botania runes, which, as you can see, there are actually quite a lot of. This entire top row here is all Botania runes. This means that we'll eventually be able to put those runes to use by making items like the Sojourner's Sash, which allows us to run faster, step up blocks automatically without needing to jump, generally just useful. And I think this is going to be our next immediate goal. All it requires is some leather, 2 runes, which we're going to make here, and some mana steel. We can make the mana steel right away because all it takes is throwing a little bit of iron inside a mana pool. Although, as you can see, that did actually use up quite a lot of our mana. Since I know it's also going to be useful, I'm also going to turn some redstone into this colorful mana powder. And while we're at it, I might as well make 32 of these mana steel ingots because we know they'll be useful. And there's still a little bit of mana left. Next up on our list of items to convert, we have diamonds, which when thrown in turn into mana diamonds, and an ender pearl, which becomes a mana pearl. All of these are going to be used pretty soon here, but I'm actually going to start some more production of these endo flames because, as you can see, there's not a lot of mana left in this. We've used up at least 3/4 of what we had previously, so we're going to have to probably devise a better system to either keep these constantly producing, or, more realistically, to produce a whole lot more mana from the get-go. But that's a later problem. Right now, we just want to get started into this mod. I'm also going to quickly take a little detour to make this alchemy catalyst. This is a pretty simple recipe, few brewing stands and that mana pearl we've just made. But what this allows us to do is that should we put this underneath our mana pool, we can now transmute various items into others. For example, by tossing these blaze rods, I'm going to get nether wart, which is really useful because I was not able to find any sort of nether warts in the nether. I did find a fortress, but no actual nether wart, so, this is a handy way of getting it without me needing to explore the entire nether. So it's useful for that, and then it has a few other uses in turning, you can create name tags or stones and slime, stuff like that. General, hard to get vanilla items. So I don't know how much we'll be using it, but it's there should we need it. Now that we've got some mana and some magical ingredients, it's time to make the Botania runes. I'm going to start with mana steel and mana powder because these are used in all of the air, water, fire, and earth runes. After that, we're going to put in one ingredient for each of these, different runes. In this case, it's just the ingredients for the fire rune, which are nether wart, gunpowder, and nether brick. And as you can see, the runic altar is completing the craft thanks to the mana that it's receiving from this mana spreader on top of our pool. And as soon as this completes, we should be able to right-click it, or put living rock on it, and then right-click to get 2 runes of fire. So now, I'm just going to be repeating this a bunch more times. Now that we have 8 of each of these basic runes, we can put them to use by making ourselves some handy trinkets. I'm going to start with what I said before, the Sojourner's Sash. Easy enough to make, but we can also make trinkets like the Third Eye, which lets us see mobs through walls, the Rod of the Skies, which lets us fling ourselves into the air, the Ring of the Mantle, which allows us to mine and attack faster, basically giving you haste. And finally, we can make a trinket case to easily hold all of these. We can also spend a few living rock to make a mana tablet, which is going to be handy to store and transfer mana from a mana pool. We can charge this mana tablet by tossing it into a mana pool. As you can see, the mana in the pool is slowly being depleted. And I say slowly, this is actually pretty quick, so in order to not lose all of our mana, I'm going to stop it just now. But as you can see, we now have a mostly full mana tablet that is able to supply mana and enable all of our trinkets. As you can see, we now have haste 2 and mine a lot faster, and we can see mobs through walls thanks to our Third Eye charm. All of those effects do actively use mana, so if we were to run out of mana in this tablet, they would stop working, but the rate is pretty slow, so for now it should be good. The next item that we want to craft is the Botanical Brewery. This is going to require a few new items. The first is a block of mana steel, very straightforward. The second is a rune of mana. Combining all of these together gives us this Botanical Brewery, which is effectively a brewing stand that can make better and longer lasting potions. We're also going to need some mana glass, which is just glass in a mana pool, and we're going to want to turn it into these mana glass vials. The purpose of a botanical brewery is pretty simple. It lets you make better potions. All you need to do is put in a vial, nether wart, as with a normal potion, and then the appropriate ingredients, which in this case is going to be blaze powder and glowstone dust. And if we point a mana spreader at it, it's going to craft us a potion that is multi-use. So I'm going to brew up a couple here, starting with this one. Vial of Vigor, which is Strength 2. I just finished crafting up some more of these vials potions, and I think we did pretty well. You can also get some effects with these that aren't available in vanilla, like Resistance 2 in a potion, or even Absorption 4, which is what a God Apple gives you. So I think we're doing pretty well in this regard. And at this point, if you're wondering why I've been stockpiling all of these potions and crafting items that allow me to move better, to see mobs through walls, to, jump higher, all of that, well, that's because between episodes, I found a few interesting challenges for us. So let's see what those are. Can you see it? It blends in pretty well, doesn't it? But it turns out that right behind our house is this friendly, or not so friendly, little guy. This is a Frostmaw from Mousie's Mobs, and they're tough. This guy is tough. So I've been considering trying to fight him. I don't know that he necessarily drops good loot, but it's not reassuring to have him right there when my house is right there. So next episode, I think we're going to at least try and take him on, see what happens. If we die, if nothing else, we won't spawn too far away. The other, and possibly more interesting thing that I found is this. Just a few hundred blocks from our base are these twin dungeons that you can see right here. And you can actually see part of them exposed down here in this ravine. So there's definitely a lot of dungeon to these structures, and if they're anything like what I remember, these are going to have a lot of loot. Lots of spawners, lots of chests, lots of levels that probably go all the way down to almost bedrock. And the mobs only get tougher as you go down, which is why I've been preparing so much with all of these potions and other miscellaneous gear. I'm going to spend some time in between episodes, well, not freezing to death, but I'm going to spend some time trying to get fire aspect on our sword and a few enchantments on our armor, so that we'll be ready next episode to head down here and see what's going on. However, before I finish off this episode, there is one thing that I think we should do. If we combine a pumpkin with some common mob drops, we can create this scary looking fell pumpkin. And if we combine this with string and amber, we can create cocoons of caprice. These cocoons have a chance of spawning random passive mobs just for placing them down. You put them down, wait a few minutes, and then something will pop out of it. More importantly, if you were to place one down and then right-click it with a bunch of emeralds, you can see that it starts consuming them. And the more emeralds you give it, the higher the chance of it spawning a villager, which means that we can start populating our little keep here. I'm going to give 20 emeralds to this guy because each emerald is an extra 5% chance, and the rest of these I'm just going to place down and we're going to see what happens. Well, it's not the best thing ever, but it's not the worst either. We now have rabbits, chickens, very small villager, and whatever this guy, a frog. I forgot that this was part of Quark. But I'm gonna keep trying until hopefully I get at least another cow and another pig so we can have, animals that we can breed together. And I'll let you know how that goes next time. For now, thank you for watching, and I hope you're ready for some serious combat in the next episode.